One of the favorite quotes just to begin this from the words of Andrew himself, to succeed as an entrepreneur, you have to be outrageously optimistic, because if you don't believe in your startup, who will? So in that note, love to introduce Andrew, and thanks for taking the time. It's evening in San Mateo in California. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sam. That was quite the intro. Thank you. Happy to be here.
No, yeah, no, appreciate it, Andrew. And I guess, yeah, to kick off, was really keen to dive into a little bit about your journey to what led you here today, and why acquire.com kind of was born.
Yeah. So I'll give you maybe the 2-minute version, and we can kind of just go from there. See where it takes us. But long story short, I would say I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I kind of grew up with that DNA in me, and I think a part of that was I grew up in a really affluent beach town. My friends had big houses and nice cars, and I didn't. I was kind of like the poor kid in middle school and high school, and so I had this like view into the world of, I remember going up to my friend's parents all the time being like, what do you do for work? Like, how do you get this? So that, and then I really started building businesses at a very young age. So I had an eBay store at 12. A funny story about that is I actually met the president of PayPal one time, and eBay and PayPal are really connected. And I said, oh, I've had like a PayPal account and eBay store since I was 12. And he goes, well, you got to be 18 to sign up. And I was like, oh, just kidding. And then after that, I started everything from a web design business for the bands at my high school. I was just kind of that kid always, trying to start stuff. And everything I started wasn't really meant to, make a bunch of money, but it was more to learn. And actually, I enjoyed entrepreneurship almost as like a sport. Like I always say that, some kids grow up wanting to be the quarterback of a football team, or play on a certain sports team or something different. And I just wanted to be the CEO of a business. But to kind of fast track that, so I entered college, and when I entered college, I told myself I got 4 years to build a business. So I graduated with a 2.07, which is, I believe, the lowest on record for Chico State, which is where I went. But I knew I did not want to have a job. So what I did is I would build a business every single summer. And when we talk about business apps, I previously had built a job board that helped connect mobile developers and businesses, because I knew iPhone apps were going to be really big. And for more context, business apps, my first company, I bootstrapped that to about 10 million in annual recurring revenue, and then sold it to a private equity firm when I was 29. But it started with this little job board, and I would see developers posting similar projects for $50,000 to $100,000, and I had a light bulb go off. Just like, why doesn't someone build a template to make this faster, easier, and cheaper? And that's how I started business apps. Ran that business for 8 years, and then started Altcoin, which was a crypto protocol company. We were trying to speed up times on the Ethereum blockchain. It's still slow, so we didn't exactly succeed, but we chipped at it pretty well, and we sold the assets to a company that took it further. And then just based on those two experiences, going through two acquisitions, one to a strategic buyer and one to a financial buyer, I remember being so confused going through the acquisition process myself personally, in terms of, how do you find a buyer? What is my startup really worth? Who can I trust? So I just felt there's a lot of, not a lot of, like I always say, there's, 100 books on marketing, 100 books on sales, 100 books on fundraising, and then there's like 2 for startup acquisition. So I just felt there was this huge gap in the market for startup founders. And so I really just built what I wish I had when I was selling business apps.
Amazing. So I guess the biggest thing is you just fell into a problem just by your own experience, and just from there started to build on that. I guess, how far has the product that you're solving with this problem now grown from what initially it was?
Yeah, so when I started Acquire.com, it was originally called MicroAcquire, and the
Mm-hmm.
idea was basically no brokers. Basically you're able to meet your buyer, set your own terms, and have full visibility and transparency into the acquisition process. And since then, we've really built out not only our advisory in terms of making sure that you're speaking to the right buyer, making sure that you're getting the right terms, making sure that you're pricing your startup correctly, helping you prepare for the acquisition. Then we've also streamlined some of the not so fun parts, like the legal part. So letter of intent or asset purchase agreements or securely closing through escrow or understanding feedback that other sellers have had with different buyers. So just really solving a lot of problems that you can go through during acquisitions
Mm.
and ones that I specifically faced when I went through them personally. So um, it's been quite the ride. But in terms of traction of the company, been in business about 4 years, helped over 1,000 startups get acquired. I'd say we're close to a billion in terms of closed transactions in total GMV. Um, so yeah, it's been a wild ride. But I think the point I'm trying to make here is when I started the business, I had no idea it would be a success. I started it candidly as a side project. I was just scratching my own itch. I just thought, hey, I think this is something the startup ecosystem needs. And people responded really positively to that. And another fun fact too, I ran the marketplace entirely by myself for about 2 years. I don't recommend that. But I'm talking all customer support, all product
Mm.
management, all sales calls. Our marketplace is also, we vet every listing. So we make sure like there's no scams or like the numbers add up. So I was verifying the listings, making them look better, writing the newsletter to market the listings, connecting them with buyers. And I was just doing all that for fun too. There was no business model, there was no transaction fee. I just felt that uh, the exit is arguably the most important part of the founder's journey, and so I wanted to fill that gap.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story. I mean, 4 years and hitting over a billion in acquisitions is a wonderful achievement. I guess, for a lot of those that are listening today, Andrew, and we're discussing this offline, are those that have got an idea and you mentioned there an itch that they want to scratch and are yet to kind of take that leap. And as you mentioned before, that this was a side project going, and you decided to give it a go and just learn and adapt and grow on the product as you go. A lot of what we see is people sometimes want to try and build out the final solution from the very beginning and really struggle to get started. I guess, what advice do you have around your own experience in the startups that you're getting acquired on getting, not being scared to take that first step to give it a go?
I mean, I would just say that, the only way to like the way I think about building startups is you're not gonna know you're right until you actually put it out in the market. And
Mm.
so if I had any advice, so let's say you have, a few ideas and this is your $1 million idea or whatever. Um, like launch it like yesterday and like get feedback, like talk to customers. Like I'm a big believer that ideas are worth absolutely nothing. I think execution and how you execute on the business in terms of the strategy and how much effort you put into the business, what you learn from customers, that's where you take. I guess maybe here's like an analogy that might resonate, but when you come out with an initial idea, like you're sort of right, like you want to be in this area, but you don't exactly know what the market wants or like how customers are going to react to it. And the only way to get that information, because when I launched MicroAcquire, I did a lot of things wrong. There's a lot of parts that didn't make sense, and if users hated it. But when I went to the market, I learned that very quickly. And then you start improving those things with that feedback. And that's where I always believe, the original idea of, microacquire transitioning all the way over to acquire.com, that was a process of just consistent execution and working on just improving the business every single day. And one of the best ways to do that is just get market feedback, talk to customers, constantly iterate, take risks. You're not going to be right all the time. But understanding that that's what entrepreneurship is there's no perfect idea and it's never gonna be perfect. So if you have 100-page business plan, just put it in a shredder and just launch your business. You'll learn more in a week just from talking to potential customers with a simple landing page or even just a cartoon drawing of what you're building. What you really want to be able to do is think less about the idea and more about how can you solve a really painful problem for a specific type of customer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you may have an idea of how you're going to solve that, but you want to validate that with customers. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time because you could be wrong. And that's really painful is when you spend a lot of time on an idea and then you launch it and customers are like, it needs to be over here and you're way over here.
Yeah. And I love that. I love everything you mentioned there. And that's what we really try to do with our founders is as quickly as possible within a few weeks, get a prototype, that's clickable to be able to go out there and showcase and validate and talk to customers and learn and learn and learn, as opposed, as you mentioned, to old school business plans, etc. Get out there in the market. And that's, go on.
Yeah, one thing I would definitely recommend just for anyone listening that maybe you're just starting to work on your startup, and I did this as well, is don't put the product into development right away. Sam, you made a great point in terms of just make a design prototype in Figma or InDesign or flashcards. It doesn't matter. But just like PowerPoint, just being able to kind of show what the product could be with potential customers, that'll really help shape and also just give you the confidence like, okay, like these 5 people loved it. These 5 people hated it. Okay, I'm going to focus on these 5 people. And then these 3 people gave me really good feedback. I'm going to try to get them to love it. But again, you only get that feedback if you take something to market. So the sooner you do it is absolutely the way to go. It'll save you money. It'll save you time. And then again, speed of execution is also one of the most important factors in startup success. So the speed at which you can get your ideas out and put them in front of customers in the market typically just increases your chance of success.
Yeah, no, that's great words of wisdom, Andrew. One big thing that I find with yourself is you've got this wonderful perspective to be able to zoom out and look at the wins, from this higher perspective of having done it in a lot of the stuff that you post. And one of the things that you mentioned is please bet on yourself and build a startup. What do you mean by that? And just trying to really provide that powerful message to people that have that idea.
Yeah, I think, one of the hardest parts of building a startup is just getting started. Like for a lot of entrepreneurs I've talked to so many that have a great idea or, it's I'll enter entrepreneurship one day but that, that day is, it keeps going and going. I got, friends that I know would be, great entrepreneurs and they want to be entrepreneurs, but they never go for it. So that's why I always say make a bet on yourself and believe in yourself, because when you first launch your startup, I'm just going to tell you right now, no one's going to believe in you. So you got to believe in yourself. You got to have confidence in what you're doing. You got to be willing to fail because you might. And, as I think through my career, I mean, I made so many mistakes. But I think, my perspective on entrepreneurship is always just, mindset is probably the most important aspect of everything that you're going to do. Because you can have when you read about startups that are doing really well, go work at one. And then inside it's absolute chaos most of the time. So the reality of startups that I think a lot of people think where everyone's killing it and everyone maybe there's 10 startups doing better than yours, they're probably just as stressed out as you, or they're going through issues, or customers are canceling. That's kind of what like being the CEO of a startup is. Like you're always gravitated towards, the hardest problems to solve in the company. So my point being there is just understanding that as like when as an entrepreneur, it's not easy, and it's never gonna be easy. That's why if it was, everybody would
Mhm.
do it. So that's why I always say just take that bet on yourself. That's the best investment you could possibly make is on yourself.
Yeah. And with that, sometimes people have got a bit of trepidation around, let's just say, competitors. They might have seen something in the market and that might stifle, their confidence to get started. I guess, how do you advise startups that you've dealt with, or even your own perspective from navigating competition? Is there a way to, I guess, turn this fear into advantage in a way?
Oh, if you don't have competitors, that's probably a bad thing. You can either think of it this way: either you're a genius contrarian and you're the chosen one to bring this new billion-trillion-dollar idea to the market, or you're wrong and you're building something absolutely nobody wants.
Yeah.
I think every startup is kind of a copy of some startup in some way. Like even Acquire.com, like we help.
Mm,
If you break it down to the very simple core problem that we solve, we help you get acquired. There's
mm.
investment banks, there's business brokers, there's other marketplaces.
There's the handshake.
So yeah, there's just other people buying. There's private equity firms. There's always direct competition, and then there's adjacent competition. So when you think about competitors, for me, it motivates me because it validates what you're building. And also, when you have competition in a market, what it does is it helps you educate the market. So if you're
Mm,
in a new market, when let's say, okay, here's one that might scare some entrepreneurs. You're a bootstrap startup, and then this other company raises, I don't know, $10 million, and they're going to win the market. Well, two awesome things are about to happen. One, they're going to spend a bunch of money educating the market, doing a ton of marketing, educating, the top of funnel, at letting everybody know that there's a solution to this new problem, and you're a potential competitor. And then second, understanding that your ability to succeed um, isn't determined by, like, markets aren't winner take all. I always say you can come in 99th place in an industry and still have a multi-million-dollar outcome. That's how big these markets are
mm.
today. So you don't I wouldn't focus on being the top in the marketplace. I mean, that's an awesome goal to have, but build basically the best version of what your vision is, or how you think the problem should be solved. And a lot of that is going to be informed by your customers. So if you have competition, that's great. Be aware of them. So be customer, or I say be competitor aware, but be customer obsessed, not the other way around. If you're competitor obsessed and you just copy everything your competitor does, well, they're probably doing stuff wrong too. So that could usually be a bad strategy. But um, long story short, if you have no competitors, that's a worse sign than having big players in the space.
Yeah. I'm not too sure if you're a fan of Simon Sinek's work, but he does this wonderful TED talk about the infinite game and the finite and infinite mindset, as opposed to when dealing and looking at competitors. And it's, as you spoke about before, it's about loving that problem to continually solve, and being obsessed with the customer. That really resonates with me.
Yeah,
Um,
I've seen that speech. I love Simon Sinek.
yeah, he's great. And just to like dive into the founder mindset from your point of view, that you're dealing with on daily, like say a startup gets acquired, $500,000, $1 million hits their bank account. How often is that happening, and kind of what's the emotional, I guess, journey that a lot of your founders are going through in that scenario?
Well, when it's closing day and the life-changing amount hits their bank account, and I have a podcast and I love asking that question and just seeing their face light up, because it's wild, you know.
Yeah.
It's the culmination of all that hard work coming to an end, and you know, just basically succeeding in entrepreneurship. And so being able to be a small part of that success story is it's an awesome feeling. You know, some of the larger transactions where, you know, it's generational wealth, those are extremely meaningful. I've gotten a few, maybe too tight of hugs, like, because it, you know, when you get acquired, for a life-changing amount of money, your last name changes. Your
Mm.
children are set. You don't have to. You have so much optionality. You can work on whatever you want. So being able to deliver that liquidity to entrepreneurs and startup founders, when they didn't think or know how to accomplish that, is really rewarding. And in terms of how much it happens, every day, every single day,
Amazing.
it blows my mind in terms of, and I should give full credit to my team, because they
Mm.
do a great job in terms of helping founders when they're going through that journey. Because when you do go through an acquisition, there's going to be bumps, there's going to be hard questions, there's going to be due diligence. It's not all, you know, sunshine and rainbows. The closing day is sunshine and rainbows, but you got to work, you know, to get acquired. You have to meet with a lot of buyers. You got to present a lot of financial information, or do a code review, or you know, meet their management team. There's a lot of things that you got to do to get someone to buy your business. But you know, once you get through all that, on the other end is, you know, life changing outcome. So
Yeah.
um, the best part of the job.
Yeah, that's great. And that's why, I'm so excited by this partnership, because for us and our team, we just love, and we jump up and down and get excited when it's day one for a founder and they've just finally quit their full-time job and gone full-time, on their startup. And then, so I guess have that support for you guys at the other end and taking it all the way through. It's just wonderful. I want to get more deeper now, even into, once a founder's in market, and this can even help when they're building. From your experience, I guess, what are the top qualities that actually makes a startup attractive to potential buyers? There's certain aspects from a founder perspective or a business, like what is it that, founders can really start to think about when they want to build their startup into something being attractive to a potential buyer?
Yeah. So the first thing there, and this kind of applies to just even just building your startup, is put yourself in the customer's shoes. So maybe you're not selling your startup, but putting yourself in the customer's shoes and like really understanding how do they want to buy, you know, what is their expectations. Now, relating that to acquisitions, the best thing that you can do to get acquired is pretty simple. Just build a great business. And I'll tell you some attributes about that. Typically, what we see get acquired by orders of magnitude faster and at higher multiples is typically profitable startups. There's been a big pendulum shift in the past 4 years from growth at all costs over towards capital efficient businesses that are typically in, you know, durable, sometimes even boring markets, that have really efficient capital or customer acquisition strategies. So if you have a profitable SaaS company that is in a market that is somewhat interesting, easy to understand, and then on top of that, to increase interest with buyers, you want to be prepared. You don't want to just
Mm.
show them your company's, you know, website and be like, "Hey, figure it out." You want to put together certain documents. One is called a confidential information memorandum. We also recommend a 36-month profit and loss statement. Also, a due diligence check. These are all things that we work with you and provide founders with. But this is my point. So the buyers that we work with are serial acquirers. So what they're doing is they're buying a lot of businesses and they're looking at a lot of businesses. And so before you sell your business, you need to talk to buyers. And so when you take your company to market, that it's just like fundraising. Your number one goal is to get meetings. And so to get meetings, you need to have enough information prepared for a buyer to get excited about your business, because you're not the only startup in the world. And that's a harsh reality that a lot of founders are surprised by when we tell them, like, some buyers, actually most buyers, will look at somewhere between 20 to 100 different businesses per day. So everything that you can do in terms of preparation, having clean financials, and just building a great business, that's an obvious one. Ensuring that it's capital efficient and it's not losing a bunch of money or in a position where it would be considered a distressed acquisition. But then also in terms of when you speak to buyers, temperament is also really important too. I used to do this thing, and I don't know why, but um, the acquisition dance where you're like, we're not for sale, but like we totally are if you give us like the right price, or like that doesn't work. I thought it did. I thought it was like playing poker where you want to like be so hard to get, like, they'll eventually give you money. But really what you're signaling to the buyers that you're going to waste a bunch of their time, and they got 20 other deals that are further along, and you just said, like, I'm going to play games with you. Like, you're just confusing buyers. So you want to be direct. I'm selling my business. Why are you selling it? Well, I built a really great business and I'd like to move on to something else. Like, you want to have like the questions that buyers commonly ask in your head right away, and know what to expect when you go to market. So Sam, I could talk for an hour on this topic, so I'll
Yeah.
leave it there and let you toss me
No,
the
that's
next
great.
question.
And I guess what you highlighted there is like the best case scenario, a company that's profitable and hitting the right metrics and gets acquired. But I'm sure you've got stories of people's side projects or someone that's just whipped up an MVP and a matter of a year get acquired too.
All the time, yeah. I mean, we work
Mm,
with a number of different buyers, and what that means is some buyers, like not every buyer, we have about 500,000 buyers registered on acquire.com. And
mm,
like not all those buyers can acquire a business for millions of dollars. Some are looking for, just products. Maybe there's
mm,
like one or two customers, maybe no customers. Maybe it's, only generating 25,000 in annual recurring revenue. Those are
mm,
still very attractive acquisition targets, because what you're essentially selling to the buyer is product market fit. You're selling to them that you
time.
have built, yeah, time. I mean, the other
Mm,
option is the buyer has to kind of chew glass for 2 years and talk to
mm,
customers, and and it might not work out. So that's really what buyers are looking for. So they're looking to acquire product market fit, and really have something that has a lot of upside to it. So potential growth opportunities, so they can take the business maybe a little bit further than you were able to, or maybe you're just bored of it and you want to move on to
yeah.
something else. We work with a
Yeah.
lot of founders that have sold 4 or 5 businesses with us,
Mm,
um, and that's typically for the larger transactions. The first thing a founder does when they get acquired is typically they look to go buy a company afterwards, or they go start
yeah.
one.
Something they love even more. Yeah, great. And I mean, what we find as well with investment is a lot of strategic investment. So it could be a traditional bricks and mortar business that understands that, tech is the way of the future, and they've been trying to think about ways that they can diversify, but they don't have the ability to just hire a team to go build a product that they don't know maybe what they want yet. So, they're like, great, let's invest into a startup that's building a tech platform that fits within the industry that can complement my existing customer base and potentially help us to grow into new markets. That's something from an investment piece. Are you seeing that from an acquisition piece, like companies potentially acquiring a platform or a product that's at a certain level to bring it in house to grow it even further?
Yeah, we do. But in terms of the reality of acquisitions is
Mm,
those are typically the outliers. Those are, we
okay.
call those strategic acquirers. So you have financial acquirers, then you have strategic acquirers. And the way I would think about it from a percentage probability chance, and me and my friend Will Schroeder, he's acquired 7 different startups. So we were kind of just discussing on a podcast. It's a good one. If anyone wants to check it out, I can send it to you. But anyways, think of it this way: you have a 40% chance of selling to private equity. You have probably like a 10% chance of selling to a strategic, for what Will quote says is all the dumb reasons, like you think, like all the, like you kind of need the stars to align. And what I mean by that is this company needs to have a reason or want to enter your market. You need to be far enough along that it makes sense. The timing needs to make sense in terms of all the other opportunities they have or all the other deals that they're looking at. And I'm not trying to rain on anybody's parade in terms, like, it's your best option. Like,
Mm,
strategic buyers will pay the highest multiple. Um, but typically, most startups will sell to a private equity firm 40%, 10% will sell to a strategic buyer. And then the other 50% is typically an owner operator. So that would
mm,
be, and this was a big learning for me with acquire.com is, just a second time founder, maybe someone who sold their business, maybe even a person that was a VP at a larger business, and they just want to buy your business and step in as CEO and run it as someone as a lifestyle business, or maybe they're looking to
mm.
acquire multiple companies. But if you are dead set on selling to a strategic buyer, we do have those on acquire.com. But the best way to sell to a strategic acquirer, it's a long game. You have to build a relationship over a long period of time. And typically the best way to do that is through partnerships or integrations, just letting them get to know you to a point where your business is worth more to the strategic acquirer than it is to you. That's typically
Mm.
when strategic acquisition makes sense.
Yeah, that's a really insightful answer, especially around the integration side. So, you might be working with a larger, say, software company, and you're a smaller provider of an API integration. Now, they could potentially want to acquire you because you're providing so much value to their customer base, and that makes
And
complete
I'll
sense.
tell you one acquisition that we're doing right
Mm,
now that kind of came as a surprise. So we are helping this companies get acquired right now, and they had like 10 letter of intent. So those are formal offers. So they're doing great. Like we're like, well, this is going to be a great success story. And then it gets better. So they are actually partnered with a company. And so they go to their partner and they say, hey, we're selling the business. And then guess what the partner says? We want to buy you. Because what happened is in acquisitions, there's a saying, if you have one buyer, you have no buyers. And so what that individual or that founder was able to do was, number one, he was partnered with a few different strategic acquirers, and then he was able to create a process where the strategic acquirer had to make a decision. So if you want to sell your business, also understand, especially with strategic acquirers, is you need to be speaking to multiple buyers at one point. Like in my case with business apps, I ended up selling to private equity, but at one point I had web.com and Deluxe bidding for the company. I was like 25 at the time, so I passed on those offers. But once a strategic gets involved, and if you can loop in a competitor of that company, that can really accelerate the decision making process. Because if there's no pressure on the acquisition in terms of you controlling the timeline, I've seen buyers drag things out for months and months, and they don't have any real urgency to close.
mm.
Maybe they'll want to watch you perform over a couple quarters. Um, so lots of little pieces of advice there, but I
Yeah.
hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that is super helpful. One question has actually come through Emmanuel, who's listening. So thanks, Emmanuel, for asking this. And with the startups that you see get acquired, Andrew, does it matter about being a solo entrepreneur? Is it easier if you've got a co-founder? I guess what's your overall advice when you get asked that question, and from what you see?
I would say it doesn't matter in terms of the performance of the company is really what the buyer is looking at. And then if you're a solo entrepreneur, I would expect some sort of transition plan. So either you or the co-founder has to do it. I've never had a co-founder. That's a whole nother discussion we can have. Um, but if you're a solo founder and you're selling, I would just expect to transition the business over for a longer period of time. If you, in comparison, if you had a team that could stay on board. For example, when I sold business apps, it had gotten to the point where I was the most useless person in the business. So I was out in 90 days. Just, what do you need me for? So if you need to know about sales, talk to her. If you need to know about finance, talk to him. So delegating is huge, but as a solo entrepreneur, all that's in your head. So when you go to sell your business, and also when you go to sell your business, one of your goals should be to really reduce the knowledge gap or the risk gap with buyers, because no buyer wants to buy a business and then the owner leaves and there's no information about the business. And this could be for simple things like small bugs, or maybe you have a customer on a special pricing plan, or maybe you have there's a number of just different things that are in your head because you've been building the business for a year or two, maybe longer than that. And so when you go to sell the business, I would strongly recommend being supportive of the buyer and really helping create a win-win partnership where when they acquire your business, you're at least available for a period of time to ensure that it smoothly transitions over to them.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like a brain dump, and even have the perspective to document as you go on your journey. And that could even be a reflective from a personal situation to think, hey, remember those cool days? It was just, me and a laptop in a garage where I was starting out. But just starting to really write that down, to be grateful for that journey you go on. But as you mentioned, start documenting that IP that's in your head for a prospective buyer can really help.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just having SOPs for how sales works, marketing, social media, all that's going to be asked during due diligence. So you're, for the person that asked the question, you're just talking to buyers, and so these are questions that they're going to want to know. And so the sooner you put that together, one tip I have in that scenario is create a transition guide. What you can do is email our team, just support@acquire.com. And we have templates of what does a transition guide look like. And typically it's laying out all your assets. How do you collect payments? For example, we use Stripe. We're hosted with Google Cloud. We use Twilio for this feature. We use these 3 other services. So the buyer can kind of wrap their head around how the whole business operates. And then if you have any contractors, listing all those individuals out, and you can keep that anonymous as well. I won't go again, Sam. You got to pull me back from the full acquisition strategy tips, because I could go long on that. But
it's great. It's good perspective for those just to understand. I've got another really good message from the audience here from Cyan. So if you have a startup idea but do not have the expertise in that area, I guess how do you fill that gap? Ensuring, I guess, that presumably this person does love the problem, just hasn't, I guess, got domain expertise in that given industry.
That's a good question. It can go both ways. And on one hand, having sort of just complete ignorance when you look at a problem can be an advantage, because, like, for example, some of my competitors, the way that they, attack or help solve helping startups get acquired is it's always been done this way. It's always been done this way. I'm an investment banker. It's always been done this way. So I'm not an investment banker. Like, I don't know how to, spend 2 days on a slide. So the way I built MicroAcquire is what I felt I needed as a startup founder. So there's advantages there where, I experienced kind of the pains and the problems and the educational gaps with acquisitions and acquisition strategy firsthand. But then also when you enter a market and let's say you just have no experience whatsoever, you get to, kind of have this viewpoint that's going to be completely different from others. But my advice, if you're in that situation, is you may be wrong. It's one thing. It's always a great path to scratch your own itch and solve a problem that you personally have experienced, because what you're going to have is you're going to have a unique insight. My unique insight with Acquire.com was there's a lot of really great software companies out there that haven't raised a lot of venture capital and are looking to sell their business. But typically, investment banks will only work with businesses that are looking to sell for 50 million and above. So
Mm,
I said, hey, there's a long tail of just software companies, on the smaller end, call it, less than 10, 20 million in value, that
mm,
could really use some help. Um, but if you're
yeah,
going into a market that you don't have direct experience with, just validate the problem first before you really dive in. But
mm,
it can be an advantage. It goes both ways.
yeah. Yeah, I love that. If I just look at, I guess, your journey, Acquire.com, probably, domain expertise would come from someone that's worked in, M&A and merger and acquisitions and thinks about this, but you've come through it from a customer having that problem, or having that experience to be able to do it as well, which is great. In saying that, I've got a bit of a fun question. What's the lowest, I guess, sale price you've seen and the highest sale price on the platform so far?
The lowest, gosh, I don't know, maybe like $1,000, something like that.
Okay.
Like some
Yeah.
little bitty one. And then the biggest, probably about a little over 10 million. So
Wow.
we're just getting over the 8-figure mark, which is really exciting for us. We actually had one close this month, which was a big win for our team, and then also the founder. It was fully bootstrapped. So
Wow.
imagine you get,
Mm,
let's call it 8 million cash wired to your bank account, and you own the whole business.
mm.
That's generational wealth, unless you need to buy a private jet for some reason.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully those some of those that are listening might have that experience. And I guess with that, knowing that there's that large range, like when should people think about, I guess, listing on the platform? What maturity of the business or stage do you think that, or have you seen get acquired that they should think about potentially listing?
I think it's really a personal question. If you want to optimize, for an outcome that is truly life changing, I'd at least try to get to 100,000 in annual recurring revenue. That's when you kind of enter a different buyer pool. And then when you get to 1 million in annual recurring revenue, you enter a different buyer pool. What I mean by
Mm,
buyer pools is at the 100K in your recurring revenue, that's enough for a buyer to come in and use the revenue to support themselves, step in as CEO, and continue growing the business.
mm,
Um, and then once you get above 1 million in revenue or profit, that's when you start talking to institutional buyers. And then once you get above 10 million in revenue, that's when the whole ball game changes. That's when
mm,
strategic buyers lean in. That's when much larger institutional private equity firms step in.
mm,
But let's say you're just starting out and you're at like, you know, 10K annual recurring revenue.
mm,
Those are good areas as well. Because again, what buyers want to see is some traction with customers, some,
mm,
as I see a lot of really great products, and we've been, focusing more on ones with traction because those see the higher multiples, and that's really our goal at Acquire.com is to help you maximize your exits. So sometimes we'll even tell you, "Hey, you have a great product. Like here's a firm to work with to help you on your customer acquisition strategy." Hyper being one of them. Um, so it depends on you personally, though. So let's talk about the personal aspect. Maybe you built
mm.
something and it's just not working out. You just can't
Yeah.
figure out how to get customers. That could be a good time. It's not always like the best outcome, but it's definitely better than just throwing what you built away and letting it go to zero. Another is like I candidly sold business apps because I was burnt out.
Mm,
I wanted to build something out. I built the company to you know a a number that was enough, and I just wasn't. I missed building. I missed the building and the early stages. And I sold the business for that reason. So it depends on like if where you at. Like, are you still excited about the business? Or is it growing like crazy and like this is a potential opportunity for you to really capitalize on what you built? Or are things just not going well and it's time to think about M&A as an option instead of just shutting down the business? So it's a real personal question, and it's the first question I personally ask as a buyer. I'm not a buyer of startups, but that's the question I always recommend buyers ask first. Just understand like what are your motivations? Why are you selling it?
Yeah.
So those are how I would think about it is, what is your goal? Write it down. And if you hit that goal, then take it to market. And then if you aren't able to hit that goal, and you run into some rough patches or you get to a point where you'd like to move on to something else, then that's another time to consider. That could also be something to write down. It's like, I'll sell this business when, it stops being fun. Because when it stops being fun, that kind of opens you up to, someone's going to outcompete you,
Yeah.
like, and then
Yeah.
also life's too short to stay in a startup where you're just, there's a quote that I read recently that was kind of eye opening, which was, if you're in heaven, but like you're upset, you're in hell, like basically. And the meaning behind that is basically, if you built a great startup, but maybe it's just you're managing people, that's not your thing.
Yeah.
You build something of value, and it's just not fun anymore. That could be a reason to sell the business.
Exactly. I agree with that notion. It's about the personal position that you're in to understand. Andrew, one thing that I mentioned earlier at the very beginning is, a big fan personally, I guess, of your thought leadership, very simple messaging on LinkedIn. How have you felt, or how have you seen from yourself creating your own personal brand has really helped to, I guess, levitate Acquire.com's brand itself? And what, I guess, advice would you give to founders to potentially grow their own personal brand in building a startup?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely open when you build a personal brand. Or let me put it this way. One of my friends who's an entrepreneur, he built a really
Mm,
successful company, sold it for about $1 billion. He before I just exited my second startup. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And he just gave me this advice. We were just randomly chatting, and he said in 2010, the winners of the markets were whoever kind of built the product first. So in that case, it was like business apps. I got luck. I got totally lucky. Hands up, lucky. Right place, right time. Um, and then we moved into what he called the second wave of specifically SaaS, which was who could figure out the best go to market model. So AI, or excuse me, AE to SCR ratio, LTV to CAC, who could have the most efficient, who could acquire customers in the most efficient manner the fastest. That was like 2015. Now we're in this phase where distribution and brand is really the big differentiator with startups, especially as AI comes out. um, you know, Building products are becoming much, much easier than before. Fun fact, I'm also not technical, so that's why I focus so much on, I don't know how to write any
sales and
code.
marketing.
Yeah, I can manage, product people, but my management is
Mm,
like, how long does that feature take? I have no idea. But anyways,
yeah.
if you're thinking about building a personal brand, just do it. Like the benefit, there's no downside. I mean, the downside is maybe some people think you're corny or like, they, but the thing about uh, building a personal brand is it really opens up so many opportunities for you, and it gives you and your company a voice and something to stand for. And in today's noisy world, I always say that, we were talking about competition earlier, Sam, but I always think of my competition, not the three companies that do sort of what I kind of do.
Mm,
It's customers' attention. It's all the other companies. It's all the other people talking. It's everybody, all the noise in the world that's the real competition for every single startup today, is cutting through the noise, being able to create, massive distribution. And as examples, I've seen companies with commoditized products. There's 100 of them in the market, but they've really mastered distribution. They've mastered the branding. And so customers will choose them just because, they've heard of them before, they were recommended. But going back to, if you think about building a personal brand, my best advice is, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, because some people will ask me like, how much time do you spend like writing stuff? And the answer is like not a lot of time at all. And I'm being honest. Like, I think anything that you do, you need to be consistent at it. So you need to do it every single day. So I literally have a whiteboard in another room where I just wrote 4 years ago, I was going to post on Twitter 4 times a day and then twice on LinkedIn. And I've just done that. Someone go find a day, holiday, my birthday is October 1st, like where I haven't posted something. Now, how do you be consistent? You need to make it fun. Like if it's not fun, you'll never be consistent and you'll never be great at it. So for me, what's fun is I like, kind of posting some cheesy stuff sometimes, like just believe in yourself. Like the tweet that Sam opened up, like be super optimistic, like be excited about what you're building. And I love getting comments that are like, hey, I just needed to hear this today.
Yeah.
That's fun to me. And then that keeps me consistent. And that's kind of my sort of style of writing. So you need to find, a way of writing where almost like you're writing to yourself, just things. I'm a big believer in the fundamentals. So I'll never write a post like, here's how to, build the best sales team ever and close deals 10% faster. I probably could, but I'd rather just say, hey, startup founders, like sales is super important. It's 99% of the job. Like
Yeah.
that's just kind of how my style is. So I'd say, find your unique voice, find a way to make it fun and be consistent. But it starts with consistency. Or actually I would say it's like maybe a circle. You'll never be consistent if every day every post is like pulling teeth, and if you're not having fun, then you're never going to be great at it. And then if you're not great at it, you're not going to be consistent. So I'd start with, finding a way to make it fun and engaging and adding just value to people. Again, my
Yeah.
favorite posts are the ones where I get comments like, I needed to hear this today, or this motivated me. Because then I feel like there's someone out there that, entrepreneurship is so hard. It's hard for me. It's hard for everybody. And so
Unreal.
just if I'm able to just inspire just one person out there, that's enough. That's fun for me.
Amazing nuggets of gold.
So
Amazing, Andrew. And yeah, I completely agree that, the way that your clear message, which is simple about those fundamentals, is really
oh,
inspiring for me and our readership.
and then another part about why they're so small is I don't like reading long stuff. So
TLDR.
also, yeah, and it kind of goes into the same vein of write for you in a way where things that you would like to read and that would resonate with you. And all I do is like to talk about startups and give perspectives on startups. And so find what resonates with you and that you can speak to. And then be consistent, have fun with it. Don't overthink it.
Amazing. Well, Andrew, we could probably talk for hours about this, which I love. I guess one last question before we let people in Australia go back to their job or whatever they may be doing, and for you as well to be able to go to bed tonight. But I guess what's the one, parting advice that you'd give to, our audience of aspiring founders, to potentially give it a go?
Just do it. Just do it. Just bet on yourself and build anything. If you have a job, build a side project. Don't quit. You don't just figure out a way to lower the risk of. I'm a very statistical person in terms of understanding the odds of success with startups. And so I'm speaking to the person who maybe is on the fence of building a company, or you've always wanted to build a company, or you don't have the capital, you don't have the resources, you don't have the connections, whatever it may be.
Mm.
Um, you know, just bet on yourself and start building and start chipping away at it. And if you have to keep a job just to reinvest some of your salary into the product, you can only work on it at night. Take that path, but just make sure you just start taking action sooner than later, because there's a saying, regret is so much heavier than failure. So just understand that you might fail, but you're gonna appreciate that a lot more than regretting not going for it. So just go for it.
Absolutely love it. Andrew, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Very excited for partnership going forward. And for those that are listening, I presume most know about you, but if not, best to catch you on LinkedIn, Twitter, I think is the best way as well. And yeah, feel free to get in touch with Andrew's team regarding potentially listing your startup for acquisition.
Yeah, and thanks so much for everybody joining. I'm rooting for all you, and yeah, just keep going and keep building.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, everyone.